Welcome to day 7 of summer camp. Today we have a very special guest. Again, this is our third of what we call the Maker on Maker series. We started with Maggie Casey, and then we did JC Fox Faulkner, and today we have Judith MacKenzie. So before we get to that, just a couple notes that I want to get to. Number one, this is being recorded and will be made available later. I'm still in the process of uploading the videos from the last 4 days. This whole the whole summer camp experience has been a learning experience for us. One of the things that we, at least I didn't comprehend, was how long it takes to upload videos. So, and to edit, I should say. So those will be up shortly, and we'll have this one up later as well. Another thing I want to say is be nice in the comments. I know a lot of you are mostly going to be saying hi to Judith in there and asking questions, but please be nice if you're talking to anybody else, or say anything to or about anyone else. Don't say anything that you wouldn't want somebody to say about you. It's kind of the easy concept there. Let's see. You can find summer camp, clemes.com/summer camp. You can find everything we're going to talk about today, as far as some of the stuff that we have available from Judith, some of the fleeces if we happen to talk about those, and everything that I've been demonstrating and working on over the last week, and what I'll work on tomorrow as well. Okay. Before we dig into it, I do want to mention our summer camp specials. We have free shipping on any order over $50. So something like a drum carder, which is big and heavy, and you're concerned about shipping costs always, that's free shipping. And we're going to keep that going as long as we're stuck here from COVID. Not able to get out on the road and hand things to you personally, we're going to keep shipping those for free. Even something smaller, like right over my shoulder here, the lock pop, those are just $105, and so hey, that's more than $50, and they ship for free. So anything under $50 has a flat $5 rate on it. We do have a couple of specials on drum carters. On our convertible drum carter, they come with just through Sunday now, so only a couple more days. So if you're thinking about it, think real hard, real fast. We are including on a convertible drum carter 4 ounces of good clean fiber with 30 minutes of one-on-one Zoom or FaceTime conferencing. So if you want help unpacking it, if you want to know how to set your carter up or where you should set it up, or if you have a project that you want to work on, you get 30 minutes of one-on-one time with either myself or Henry. Maybe both of us, depends on what day of the week it is, right? And let's see, on a crankless drum carter, you get 1 hour of either Zoom or FaceTime one-on-one video conferencing, as well as 8 ounces of good clean fiber. And on the double wide, you get 16 ounces of good clean fiber in addition to the 1 hour of one-on-one time. So something to think about. And I think that covers it for my early notes here. Yes. Today's code word, courtesy of Judith, is sheep. Pretty simple. I like it. And that code word, you want to write that down, and you can enter that tomorrow. We'll make a link available on the clemes.com/summer camp page, and you can fill in all of the sheep. I'm sorry. You can fill in all of the code words for the week on that link that we make available. And every day that you enter a code word is the day that you're eligible to win the prize. And today's prize is 4 ounces of Shetland wool. And if you listened to me talk yesterday, you know I'm not very fond of Shetland wool, but I know that the lady we have on today has a special affinity for it. So in honor of Judith, we're going to give away 4 ounces of some nice, very fine Shetland wool there. So again, that code word for today is sheep. I will try to remember to say it again a couple times and actually mention that it's the code word and not just say sheep. So there we go. On to our program for today. Today we have Judith MacKenzie. I feel like she doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to do a really brief one, and I couldn't find anything great. So this is what came off of the 3 Bags Full DVD. I feel like Judith has led such a full life that 2 sentences don't cover it, but the 3 Bags Full DVD cover had at least a little bit of a morsel that covered enough. Judith MacKenzie has been spinning and weaving most of her life. Her traditional training has been expanded with world travel, deep research, and industry consultation. She writes and teaches extensively, not expensively actually. She writes and teaches extensively and is the author of The Intentional Spinner. So, Judith, welcome on. I'm going to spotlight you so that everyone can see you. So, hello, Judith.
Hello, Roy. This is lovely. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you for being willing to join me here, and thank you for persevering through the little bit of technological issues that we had there, as is the case. I know that both you and your friend Maggie Casey are self-proclaimed Luddites.
Mm-hmm.
And, this
Big L.
Yeah, there you go. I know this is a new foray for you, and I thought maybe that would be a pretty good segue as far as I feel like your knowledge is so broad and wide and deep. Is there anything that you don't yet know about? Is there anything that you're interested in learning or going after, or maybe there's like a current rabbit hole that you've fallen down? So let's dig into that a little bit.
Rabbit holes. Well, let me think. I'm interested a lot in how we look at textiles. I noticed that maybe it's not so bad now, but when I was a younger woman, what would happen? Somebody would say, I'd be at a cocktail party, my little drink in my hand, and someone would say, well, and what do you do? And I'd say, I'm a spinner. And they'd say, what? And they'd immediately look at me and say, perhaps she isn't the kind of spinner we're thinking of, because they were thinking of bicycles. And when I would say, I make yarn, I make thread, that's what I really do. I make thread, and it comes in all sorts of different sizes and shapes and colors, and we use it for a million things. And it's hard to remind humans that that's what got us out of the cave. No thread, no human development. You can't really even make a good fire without a thread. So when you look at it, it's not just sweaters for women. It is the continuity of how we have used material starts out there. We make thread long, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years before we make clay. And in actual fact, there is no culture that skips a step of being able to make a basket that you can boil water in that develops a clay culture. That's an interesting relationship between how thread helps us learn about the world we live in and to make it our own home, to modify it and change it and make it our home. And now we have little understanding of the importance of that. It's curious how quickly it goes. Yeah.
Right.
So that's what I'm thinking about a lot, is the number of ways that we do actually use thread and why we made it and who made it and what they made it out of. Yeah.
So I guess in that sense, then what direction is that taking you? Are you looking more at what kind of educational programs we could provide, or what sort of content we could create to educate the public in general, or
that would be really nice. It would be really nice to have more developed textile programs. Textile programs are the things that bite the dust as soon as there's a bit of a crunch on money, because like in my field, I'm primarily a weaver and spinner. So both of those things take equipment that can't easily be shared. Spinning wheels maybe more. Like if you have a classroom set up and you've got 20 people in it, they either have to bring their own wheel or we have to provide it. So in lots of cases, we provide those wheels in a more like a degree granting program. We would do that. So the first thing that goes in a degree granting program is the loom room, because the looms take up a lot of space and they can only be used by one person. In a clay studio, the potting wheel can have 3 different classes there. And the kiln doesn't matter. You can fill it up as much as you want and as often as you want. And so the number of students that you have involved in the workspace changes dramatically. So that's a big issue. And I mean, it's in that case, I used to think that actually people weren't respectful of textiles at all, even though they would be in a hard space without them. I've often said that what if the good wish fairy ever came by just one time and said, Judith, what would you like? What would you really, really like? And I don't really want a pony as much as I would really like textiles to vanish from the face of the earth for, depending on how I'm feeling, you know, maybe for 24 hours. If I'm really feeling a little put out about it, 48 hours. And I'll tell you, every knitter, weaver, and spinner would have somebody knocking on their door saying, hey, aren't you that woman who does weird things with string? Yeah, that's what would happen, because they'd be cold, they'd be dark, and you know, just because it's made out of metal does not mean that it is not spun, and that the principles between transferring power through thread is not the same dynamics when it's made in metal. So it's interesting to me that we have such a disconnection from that field, and how it is still important to us. Yeah.
Well, I'm making a mental note here. One of my next projects should be the multi-warp loom, so that we can have multiple people working on a loom at one time, right?
That'd be really good. Yeah.
I'll say maybe we can slot that in just above pony on your wish list. Is that right?
Yeah, that would be good. Just above the pony. Yeah.
All right. I like it. That was a pretty good way to get kick-started there. I like that. So I did want to thank you, not just for coming on, but everybody can see up there. Well, she's closed it off there, but my little baby boy was sleeping there, and you got to see him for just a little bit. I want to thank you for actually sending my future wife towards me, because in 2012 at the Conference of Northern California Handweavers, in a class, you told her that she had to have a flicker, and then she walked into our booth, and that was actually how we met. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. And I'm wondering if, you know, she's one of many students that you taught. I've taken a class of yours as well. I'm sure that everybody who's on here is probably taking one of yours. Do you have any idea how many students you taught throughout the years?
Would we be counting people who actually came to a class, or people that I dragged in off the street? Well, on a bus saying, what do you mean you don't spin, little girl?
Well, I mean,
no,
maybe.
I don't have a clue. I really honestly don't have a clue. I remember my students really well, but I never think of them in numbers. Yeah. But we have made a huge change. I mean, there's a huge change. At one time, you know, Weavers Guilds were very reluctant to have spinners in them in the early days. That's just not true anymore. You know, we're starting to see the relationship between a thread and cloth, and it's very powerful. It's great. I'm really happy to see it. I mean, even if you never, I taught for a long time. I taught what I said was a terminal spinning class, and it was primarily for people who worked in textiles, either in industry as designers or as weavers on their own, doing production weaving. And what I said is, this will make you a better weaver. It'll make you a better weaver because you'll understand what the thread that you just bought is capable of. Because thread is designed to do definite jobs. As I said, we are the first engineers, and we make thread to do different tricks. If you have a 2-ply yarn, and let's say as a knitter, you want to make a lace project. If you try that with a 3-ply, you're going to be a little disheartened compared to what you did with a 2-ply. And I just have to say, often if you're using a single, you might find that it's a bit wild as a snake in a lace pattern. Perfect for all, I mean, they'll all make beautiful fabric in the right form, but you have to match the form. Well, it's that same old thing that we should have been born with it tattooed on our forehead, that form follows function. And the form of thread has become unknown to us. Like we think, I think that because I hear it so often, that the only reason we ply is to make a thicker yarn. It's not true. You test it out yourself and make a sample out of each one of those, a single, a 2-ply, 3-ply, 4, and see the difference in what happens as your fabric, how your fabric forms on your needles. And it's interesting, you know, it's such a simple thing. It's a very simple thing to actually do, to knit and spin and weave. It's not complicated like nuclear physics, and not nearly as dangerous as nuclear physics. We should put more money into weaving and spinning. Yeah, yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that about plying. I mean, that's such a basic principle, but again, it's something that's probably missed a lot. That's also, that echoes something that JC said on Wednesday about part of the reason that they chose ply as the name was that, you know, it does increase the strength, it does increase the diversity, it makes a better fiber. So it's interesting talking to both of you that you would have the same kind of concept, you know, or the same kind of grasp of something that does seem so basic that we all miss, you know, and that seems to be innate to both of you. So is there is there something else? Is there maybe another concept that is that basic that comes to mind that blows your mind how often people get it wrong?
Yes, the idea that if it's new, we're moving forward. It's not always true. So, you know, it's really not true. I mean, there are many things that we think of as modern and efficient that aren't modern. And well, they are modern, but they're not efficient compared to what we would do in a different situation. I look at things like, I lived in a log house for a long time with a sod roof, which was really interesting. But you know what? It was warm and it was toasty. And yes, not everybody can do that. You know, I'm sure regulations in scenic downtown Seattle are not going to include how thick your sod roof should be. But we have lots of technology that kept us efficiently equipped to get by in the world without somehow using more resources than we actually need to use. I think about that in clothing all the time. Well, okay, there's the classic thing. So what happened between 1950 and 1980? What in the clothing world is that clothes that you were going to wear for more than a year became unpopular. And now what we have is an incredible throwaway culture in clothing. And it's not just the, you know, fashion is always blamed for this by saying, okay, so all they want to do is sell to you. But the fact is, a lot of the clothes are not well made enough. I was at a museum back east in just after Lady Diana, Princess Diana died. And so it's about a year after that. And the museum had a collection of her clothes, all her clothes, all her beautiful ball gowns and her evening gowns and her suits and all the clothes. She had put them on tour to raise money for AIDS, which was, you know, very generous and very wonderful. And so we got a chance to look at them. And I want to tell you, I was horrified at the things that I saw. Like, what you never want to see is a zipper. You don't really want to see a zipper in proper tailoring. And we know that she was very particular about her clothes, but I could see little things like that all the way through it, which I know, having had one of my mother's friends was a dress designer in Canada for the royal family. And so I saw a lot of those when I was a little kid. And um, you wouldn't have seen that zipper. You wouldn't have seen it. You wouldn't have seen the little unevennesses here and a tiny pucker there. So we're very different in the way that we think about clothing. We're thinking about it more as a quickly moving image rather than a lasting piece that will endure past us, you know, something that you pass down. We don't think about passing down our clothes anymore. And I don't know whether that's right or wrong, but I think it's interesting that we've done it without speaking about it, you know, especially the really disposable stuff. That I do think is wrong. I think it's dreadful. Especially, I was looking at things like cashmere sweaters because I love cashmere, and I also love the goats, and I love the whole culture of it. And I know how much, when you are wearing that sweater, how much of that goat's life you took to have it done. You know, how many years that goat had to eat little twigs and branches to make you that much fiber for you to wear that sweater. So I'm an avid Goodwill fan, and I collect a lot of, I'm on a mission to save every cashmere sweater that is going to be disposed of. It's shocking to me that we do that we have these beautiful things that animals have spent their life making for us, and we wear them maybe one season and then pitch them. Yeah. I'm going to work hard to make sure people don't do that.
Yeah, and not just the what I would say, the lifetime or the work and all the effort of the goat to grow that, or the sheep, whatever you will, but you also have the all the input, all the food that's then wasted that went to feed that, and all the labor of the farmer, and then all the labor of all the tailors and everybody who processed it. And it does become quite a wasteful process, this whole concept of fast fashion. So
yeah, it's disrespectful of where we and who we are and how we fit in. Yeah,
that is an excellent way to think of it.
And we'll get over it. I mean, we're decent, you know, we're all decent people. It's just that we don't think about it, you know, we just don't think about it. So, but we'll get over it.
So how do we encourage people to think about it?
Well, I think one of the things that you could do is you could start thinking about clothing like you do your granny's sterling silver, you know, that it's something you keep and you maintain and you're happy to wear, even if it has, the color might be not the right color. And you just wear it, like I said, like sterling silver. But I also think that we could do a lot better job in this country in simply recycling fabric. We for a long time, we sent everything to China to be recycled, and we can't really do that anymore right now. And it's for a good reason. It's because China is able to have its economy strong enough that it doesn't have to work for those dreadful low poverty, thousands of miles below the poverty level wages. So, you know, that's what you can expect. I mean, you send all your waste to a country for them to use it, and they are sooner or later going to grow out of wanting to do that for you. And that is what's happening now. So what are we going to do? Can we, in this country, find a way to remake things? You know, I was just writing a little bit on something for JC, and one of the things that when I was working on it, it just started a memory chain for me. And one of the things that I remembered was how and you know, I come from Canada, which is a cold and country and we use a lot of wool. We can't grow cotton, for instance. We did try. It was so dreadful. You can't even imagine. You just can't imagine. Cotton just does not want to live where it's 60 below. Not nice. So what happens in Canada is that we would collect every bit of wool scrap we had. Old wool socks, every single person is going to have at least 10 pairs of wool socks. That's just how it is. And as they wear out, wouldn't it be nice if we darned them all? We don't always do that, but we can send them back to a garneting mill that will take them, open them up, and make them into new yarn and make blankets and all sorts of nice things out of that. And we don't, I noticed, I checked, you have to put that on the label of clothing. And I noticed that we don't do that. We just don't do that. And, you know, a lot of the modern textiles, and I know like Patagonia, the guy that started Patagonia is brilliant, and I admire him a lot. He was a wonderful, wonderful climber. But he comes from the Basque region in Spain, you know, where people have put sheep there and they have destroyed the landscape. So he was on a mission, an actual mission to completely wipe sheep off the face of the earth. He saw them as one of the worst environmental disasters that had happened. And he's right in lots of ways, except that it's not the sheep that are doing that. It's a human that decided to put 1,000 sheep where 700 would have done just fine, and to gouge the land out of it. So, you know, so we had this huge surge in synthetic fiber. Let me tell you, if you're caught in a rainstorm on here where I live on the Olympic Mountains, I have a friend, it's a climbing friend, and she was up in the Olympic Peninsula climbing way above the tree line in August, was caught in a freak snowstorm. She lost a leg because she did not have wool on it. We know that, and we laugh about it a lot. But she got frostbite so bad because her gear was wet. It was a heavy wet snow. All her clothing was wet, and the front of her shins simply froze and had to be taken off. So you look at that and you think, we have this wonderful material that is completely renewable. Here I am, I'm back on the wool circuit, but it's completely renewable. And it does nothing but take grass and sunlight and water and make us a fiber that we can use over and over again, that we can reform, that we can make felt out of, we can make a million things out of it. And we don't really encourage it. I've watched the sheep numbers, not the sheep that people are raising in their backyard, but the sheep herd numbers in this country just plummet. And I've watched the mills closing, and I'm sorry about that. And if there's anything I could do to change that, I would for sure. If the Good Wish Fairy came by, I'd wish that we would have a more active appreciation of what sheep can do for us. Yeah.
Not even to mention the inflammability and the antimicrobial.
Right. All that stuff.
We could go on for days with all of the benefits, right?
And it increases in warmth when it's wet.
Yeah.
I love that. I live on the West Coast, so you know, wet is really familiar to me. Wet and wind, and you don't want to be caught out in there with your synthetic material. The synthetic material will keep you dry, warm as long as you're dry. It doesn't work really well when you're wet. It just doesn't.
I think one of the things that has kind of flown under the radar in our community that was a huge loss in the last few years was the Navy switching the pea coat from wool to synthetic.
Right. What were they thinking? So what I would say is one of these days we should have an old pea coat and a new one and a barbecue. See how that works. Because not only are they not warm, and they're not really what I would call renewable if you're using oil to make them, which we are, they're incredibly flammable. Now, I know I've watched enough movies to know what can happen if you are in the Navy and your ship blows up. You know, there's fire and all that kind of stuff. You don't want that. You don't want to be in a flammable garment in a tight enclosed space, do you? Ever? No.
I think the barbecue concept is great, but let's go a little bit further. Maybe we should put the two senators that made that decision, maybe we put them one each in each of the coats, and we'll see which coat they fight for, and then we'll know what was the right.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and the interiors of airplanes. You know, New Zealand, sheep capital of wool capital of the universe. In New Zealand, the planes that are flying in New Zealand have wool That's what they have in the interior. And our planes did for a long time too. And I haven't checked recently, but I should, to see whether we're still doing the upholstery and seats should be in wool, because it's very not flammable. If you're not sure, try it. That there is a downside to that. But it's the same with synthetics, is that when it does burn, the gases it gives off are not good for you, but none of the gases that come off are good for you. So
yeah. Well, I know, it just kind of tangent to that. I know that Southwest went back to leather a few years ago because they found it was much longer lasting and a lot easier to clean than the synthetics they were using. So I don't know, but that nugget in particular does stand out.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good step. It would encourage me to use that airline.
There you go.
Good ad material. Yeah.
Hey, there we go. Southwest, you can fly on our leather seats. There we go.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Safe in the arms. Deep. Yeah.
There you go. Is there, as long as we talked about leather there, I guess I kind of brought it up. Are there any new uses for sheep leather out there? I haven't seen that many lately, but one of the things when you were talking about being respectful of the animal, is there, other than the meat and the fiber, and we see the horns are used as dizzes and things like that, are there any other kind of new uses for leather, or any other parts of the animal that you've come across lately? I don't know.
I don't know. I should check. I'll check into that, Roy, and I'll let you know. But one of the things that I do have to say is that I was in the Arctic for a while, off and on. Every Canadian has to go and work in the Arctic for a while, and thank heavens I did. And one of the things that I learned was a really good thing. And they say when the old people hunt, foxes go hungry. That's how we should live. I don't think that, if we stopped using sheep would disappear. They are a domestic animal. We would make them extinct. That's what we would do. Nobody's going to keep enough genetic material around and as house pets. It's not going to happen. So, if you think the way to solve this is to get rid of sheep and have synthetics and go that way, as the guy that owns Patagonia did, one of the things that you have to think about is, now I've completely lost my line of thought, not for the first time, but
talking about using the whole animal or anything.
Yeah, but if I feel comfortable having an animal slaughtered, if we are going to use every single little bit of it and pay attention. We can use every bit of it, and truly we do use every bit of it. It was very little waste when we that it's in the slaughterhouses, they call it the fifth quarter. I have some experience with slaughterhouses because I watched bison. I'm very fond of bison. Worked for Ted Turner on his bison ranch, and I grew up loving them. My grandmother lived in Alberta, and we always went down and saw the Blackfeet with the bison. And so recently, one of the leaders of the in the Blackfeet Nation had a long talk about stuff and how they used every bit, how they used the scrotum sac, they used every bone, they used the eyelashes, the liver, everything. And I went up to him and I said, afterwards, but you didn't talk about the underhair. You didn't talk about the down coat. He said, oh, that awful stuff, that darn stuff. He said, when I was a kid, we had to clean up all the time. It gets into everything. And it's a kid's job to clean it out. And so I thought, I'll make him a scarf. And I did. So I made him a scarf and sent it off. And he came back. And he had a huge chunk of bison for me. And he said, for 7,000 people, for 7,000 years, my people have lived with the bison, and we have lived as one, and we have always treated them honorably and made good use of them. He said, now the circle is complete. We use every bit of it. Isn't that sweet?
There we go.
It was just sweet to see how he understood that that one product was also valuable. And that's what we sometimes in industry miss. I don't think individual people miss that, but I sure think industry does. And I think in some ways it's a more, they do it because it's cost efficient. They don't do it because they think it's morally right. You know? Yeah. We might have to pay a little bit more, strangely enough, if we recycled every little bit of everything. But I do know in a slaughterhouse, everything is used, everything. That's how the people who own the slaughterhouse are paid in what they call the fifth quarter. And, yeah.
And I think it's kind of like you were talking about earlier, it's really that changing that mindset is the only way to really achieve, you know, what we're talking about as far as educating people and changing how we treat fabric and changing how we treat, you know, our wardrobes and everything like that. And it's difficult, and especially the longer something goes, the more you get used to it. So like you said, from the 50s to the, you know, 90s, we really turned hardcore towards this, you know, polyester and, you know, all these other synthetics, and now it's kind of hard to turn back. And it's been this way so long now, you know, we've got so many generations that it's hard to turn around and change the mindset. And I know even for us as a company, it's something where it's difficult, where, you know, we're woodworkers and we're, you know, spinning wheel makers, and that's kind of what you wake up in the morning and that's what you think about doing. But I was just having this conversation with my wife yesterday, and it's like, you know, we're really a sustainable, you know, a sustainability company where we're about education and we're about providing the fiber, we're about all these. And so it's actually very relieving once you make that mindset change to say, okay, this is actually what we're doing. I feel like I've been fighting it for so long, you know, where it's like, oh, that's what we do. I'm not just a guy who works with wood, you know, I do all these other things. And so when you do change that mindset, and I think it's the same way, whether it's a wardrobe or whether it's, you know, about meat or, you know, using the whole animal or something like that, that little switch of how you think about things really kind of gives everything a new filter, a new purpose, and makes it a lot easier to kind of accept those things. So very, very interesting stuff.
Yeah, I think so. I think you said it very well. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. And as long as we're talking about something that I said, I hear a lot of things quoted, attributed to you, quotes attributed to you sometimes, kind of like, you know, we all know that Abraham Lincoln said, you can't believe everything you read on the internet. I think I was it must have been Red Alder earlier this year, and there were two friends talking about your wolf yarn, and one of them swore that it was called that because it had wolf in it. So
Yeah.
so I'm wondering what the most ridiculous thing is that you've heard attributed to Mother Mackenzie, if there's anything that comes to mind.
Not really. That's interesting. No. I really can't. Oh, let me think. No, I can't.
Okay.
I need a sheltered life. But I think that's funny about the wolf yarn. Yeah.
Oh,
so yeah. Why it's called wolf yarn is because when I was young, you know, I made a living as a spinner, and I had 2 kids, and I lived on Salt Spring, wonderful little island that's very supportive, thank heavens. But still, that was my bread and butter, yarn. And it was quite unique back in those days. There was nothing like it. And I sold it all over the world. And so I said it was wolf yarn because it kept the wolf from the studio door. And it did. It did. Yeah. So, yeah. No, I can't think of anything, Roy. Sorry. Yeah.
No worries. No, it was something that came across my mind while I was thinking about it. I was like, you know, I so many people, you know, I think our community has so much respect for you, and so many people have taken your classes and watched your videos and your books, and so many people that have maybe not even met you yet consider you as a personal friend, and
Good.
attribute quotes to you and things like that. So I just wondered if any of them had got back to you. So
None that I can think of at the moment, but I'll bet at 2:00 in the morning I'll come up with a couple of good ones. Yeah.
there we go. Yeah, I'll get a text from you at 2 a.m. and that's okay. 'Cause
Right.
I'm sure Hank will have me up anyway, so I'll read it then. So let's, if you don't mind, I'd like to maybe talk about dyeing just a little bit. That was the next thing I have up on here. We have your dyes listed on the website. As soon as you get them back in stock, then we'll have them in stock, which is something that I'm really excited about. How did you, let's just start with how you got started in dyeing. Was that one of those things where, as far as the process goes, were you knitting and spinning and weaving already and then dyeing came? Or was this something where you were, learning the whole process together? Or how did you get into, how did you get started? And then what kind of things I don't want to say what have you learned along the way, because there's so much that, you could probably fill 10 volumes with that. But how has your thinking about it maybe changed in your time as a dyer?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So I started dyeing, strangely enough, before I did hardly anything else. And I started because I come from an old, an immigrant family that came from Scotland, from Inverness. And my grandmother, my grandmother came as a young bride, shipped over from one of the convents to be a bride to somebody that she would meet, that she'd be introduced to here. And she still lived in that world. And so in the convent, they had taught them all sorts of things. They taught them how to sew and knit and cook, all sorts of wonderful, wonderful things. And it was like they were living in the 14th century. So she had a lot of really interesting skills. And she told me that when she was young, she used to dye yarn. And I thought, well, how did you do that? And she said, well, you just go out and collect plants and then you boil them in a pot and they turn color. And so that's what I did. I had a little campfire and an apple juice can, and I collected, that's how I got started in lichens. I collected lichens and found out by trial and error how to dye with them. Yeah. Trial and error in my grandmother. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And from that, I went from there learning how to spin, and from there learning how to weave. I never really learned how to knit really well. I can knit, but most of the time when I'm knitting, if there's a really good knitter in the room, they'll say, just give me that. I'll fix it.
Hey, you have to know what you're good at, and sometimes you just have to pass on the things you aren't, right? So.
I still love knitting, and I love what knitters do with yarn. So it's really fascinating to me to see what a knit structure does and how what we spin changes in that. And for heaven's sakes, I sold sweaters for a million years, and I made stuff for a couture designer for a long time. But it's nothing like what you see knitters doing nowadays. It's not. I mean, they're so skillful. Just in the last 25 years, it's been an amazing change. Just amazing. It's really wonderful to watch. Yeah. I think you'll see weaving catching up with them soon. Well, not soon, but catching up. Because what happened was we shift between weaving being a really interesting fabric form and knitting being a really interesting fabric form. It sort of goes in waves. And we've had a long wave of knitting. And just now there's starting to be an emergence of people interested in starting weaving again. So that's really good. It's all good.
I think those rigid heddle looms help a lot as well. It's a little taste test, little sample that you can take home and work with, and I think it is a good way. Going back to what we talked about at the very beginning, I think it's a good way to kind of get people in, and you don't have to have this 48-inch floor loom taking up all this space, right? So
that's right.
All right.
You know how small my house is, and I just bought a 3-inch loom, and I thought, and then I had to have a quiet, tiny moment where I said, "What were you thinking? You're going to have to sleep underneath it." But it's beautiful. It's the same age as I am.
All right.
Yeah, isn't that great? Yeah, old Gilmore.
It's just getting broke in then.
Yeah, that's right. Just getting off to work. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Might have to shore up the flooring in there, huh?
Yes, probably true.
Those Gilmores, they're built pretty solid.
They are.
So I love what you said there about dying over the wood fire.
Yeah.
Which one is more fun, dying over the wood fire or being able to dial it up to the exact temperature that you want?
Oh, crumb. I like them all. I just like them all. Yeah. And I liked how ancient dyeing is. I mean, it goes back 1,000,000 years. And I also like how important it was. I mean, countries were built and disappeared on whether or not they could produce certain colors and dyes. And it used to be a huge status symbol and lots of religious connotations about who could have what color and who couldn't. And I just found it fascinating. In the early days, most of my work was I spun yarn and made tapestries for banks and those kind of places. And then I decided that I wanted to. Oh gosh, that's what happens when you're raised by a political union organizer. I decided that I should make stuff for the people, and so I moved to a little island and I made clothes and blankets and things for everyday use. And one of the things that was really such a pleasure was to be able to produce my own color. And I love to work in the dye pot. I love it. I never get tired of it. It's always magic. And it is like alchemy. You take something that's one color and you put it in there and it comes out some other beautiful color. And you did that, it's very, very interesting. And I think also technically it's interesting. I had a national research, I dyed silk. I was Trinway very first silk dyer. And I got a National Research Council grant to investigate the technical application of dye on silk. And that's what got me interested in looking at how fibers are so different in their structure and what they do and how they work. Like wool is really interesting, how it takes dye. And we have dyes, dyes come in 50 million different qualities and quantities. And I have always used dyes that were made by Ciba Geigy. And when I got the National Research Council grant, they came to my studio and said, "How can we help you, little girl?" And one of the things that I learned was that my very, very, very favorite Ciba dye was about to be made extinct. I'm saying, why are you doing this? It was, for those of you who dye, it was the Irgaland series. And it was a wonderful dye for people like me. It's very easy to apply, an intense color, and it takes very little dye to make a huge amount of color. So perfect for an indie dyer like me. So what happened, this guy sat down and explained to me what was going on. He said, "Don't worry about it." He said, Ciba is working on a new dye, and you'll like it a whole lot better. And it will dye intense colors at twice the speed and half the cost. And of course, what they were doing was that, so that's in the 1970s, they were coming up with a dye that would dye superwash. So, the research is all there and it's all linked and it's all together. It takes a long time, but a company like Ciba Geigy has been around for thousands of years. They don't mind. They do not mind. Yeah. It's an old dye house, really, really old dye house. And now they don't make dyes anymore, which is kind of odd. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bummer. When
Yeah.
when you say a dye is going extinct, can you explain what that means to somebody who might not be familiar with
Oh,
that?
it's really simple. It just means the same thing that it does with a plant. It's going to not be made. They're abandoning that particular way of making a dye, and they're going to make another type of dye. And but one of the really nice things about wool dyes is that for the most part, other than one that was used early in the 60s here, it has no demonstrated health risk. And when you say no demonstrated health risk, that could mean that they have not found health risk yet. But the dyes, like for instance, the dyes that I use, and I think most people who are working in natural fiber, I don't dye cotton. I don't dye linen. If I did, it would be with indigo or cochineal or some nature dye. But even with nature dyes, you should be careful. You have to be careful. It's all a chemical reaction. So. Yeah, it's interesting to me how long the dye history is and how far back it goes, and how they're now geared to dye certain things. And I mean, this is not much different than what we've always done, but just more intense, I think. Yeah.
Is that something that we as a community, I guess, need to be concerned about, as far as if people are, or I should say, commercial is moving more towards dyes for synthetics? Is that something where we need to be concerned about losing our sources for dyes that work on natural fibers?
I think not. Because I think there's always in this world, where the high-end market is, it isn't in synthetics. So I think you're always going to find a good market in this world. It may be getting smaller. I know it's getting smaller because anything that will dye silk and wool is not, synthetics are usually dyed in the liquid before it's extruded. And so it's a very different process. But I think when you look at, if you went and looked at very expensive clothing, you're seeing a lack of synthetics. Yeah.
Good to know.
So,
I think definitely, I definitely agree with that concept. And not only I would say is that a lot of those things that are, the high-end markets, a lot of the stuff that I see in the fiber shed marketplace and things like that, where they're focused on, all being processed within the same geographic area, and even being used with dyes and plants that are grown in that same geographic area. So a lot of those are even shifting away from, the acid dyes and things like that, where everything is grown within a certain radius of where it's made. So I would concur with that, but I'm obviously deferring to your professional experience and opinion there on that.
I'd be careful about thinking, for sure, I'd be careful about thinking that dyes from plants are more safe. They aren't.
Okay.
They aren't more safe. They're just chemicals. And so what we have to do is be careful no matter what. I mean, dyeing with cedar in your house could do you serious harm. Dyeing with foxglove in your house would be definitely a mistake. It's very toxic in fumes. It's, as I said, it's all a chemical. It's all chemicals. Be careful. Yeah. Mind yourself.
Yeah. I mean, we have, it's like you said, things go back, thousands and thousands of years. Thanks to all the people who tried to dye with all of those things in their tents 10,000 years ago to figure out that it was fatal, right?
Yeah, that's very grateful.
Bloodlines there.
I'm the one who figured out that if you dye with cedar, that you will probably do yourself serious harm. Yeah.
Okay. I got to know that story.
So I lived in Salt Spring. I had this big cedar hedge outside of my house, and I was into my waste not, want not, everything that comes from nature is fine. Not even thinking about rattlesnake venom and those kinds of things. I took all the trimmings when the road crew came and ground up the hedge that was hanging over the road. I thought, oh, I'll just dye with this. And so I took it home, put it in a big vat, and went to make my dye liquor. It's a concentrated. Well, by the time in one day, we had to leave the house for a week because it seriously burnt my eyes and my nose just from the fumes. Just from the fumes. Yeah. And, people said, didn't you ever know about pine sol? Things like that. Of course. Yeah. Of course you can.
I like it. You made a very concentrated batch of homemade pine sol there. You could probably still clean your floors with that batch if there was any left. Yeah. All right.
And it gave a lousy color too on top of it.
Oh, that's good. Classic.
It is. It's a classic dyer's art. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. So now that you've gushed about dyeing for a little bit, if you could only do one of these four things, spinning, dyeing, fiber prep, and weaving for the rest of your life, which of those four would it be?
Oh, that's toughest really question. Hard.
Yeah, toughest question of the day. I saved this one before we open it up to questions, so I'll stall for a little bit to let you think. But we're about an hour in. We've got 30 minutes or so left, and we'll open it up to questions afterwards. And I saved this tough one here for you. And I'll just talk a little bit. We were talking about your dyes, and those are available to order on our website now. That's 60 ounces, I believe, and Judith says that'll dye 60 pounds of wool. We've got them on there at $70. That includes free shipping. So you can get those delivered right to your door, and we'll have those in stock. Like everything else with COVID, they're on a little bit of a back order. So those will be ready whenever Judith gets them. We'll have them ready for you guys. And those are available on clemes.com/summer camp. I saw people asking where they could find them in the notes. So one more thing I should mention, today's code word is sheep. So everybody, if you're playing along, you're going to want to write that down. And so now, Judith, I gave you about a minute to think about it there. If you could, if you had just one, spinning, dyeing, fiber prep, or weaving, you only get to do one of those for the rest of your life. Which one is it?
Well, it was really strange because so what I did was as soon as you said that, I went, oh, of course, I'd be a dyer. And it doesn't make any sense. I mean, I love dyeing. And would I be able to give that up? I don't know. And in fact, would I be able, and the next one would have been spinning, and the next one would have been weaving. And I just can't imagine having any of those not together. But it was interesting, because that was my first response was, oh no, I couldn't give up dyeing. But that was just because it was on the first of the list, I think.
So you're not giving up any of them?
No.
Oh, well, I knew you wouldn't. But
yeah, we'll have to change the universe. We can't have that one ours. Yeah.
My theoretical universe has collapsed already. Yes.
Good. That's good.
All right. Well, thank you for that one. I'm happy to hear that you're so dedicated to all four of those that you won't give any of them up for an imaginary.
Well, how could you? You would be fracturing. If you can't make cloth and you can't make thread and you can't color it, you really don't have any textile. You just don't. Yeah.
Okay, so they're all linked. Can't get rid of any of them. I got you. Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to start digging into some of the questions that people have tossed into us here on Zoom. And let me just see what people would like to know from you. Okay. Deanna says, I'm curious to know your thoughts on all of the new developments in novel fibers whose sources are renewable but very processed, like sea cell, milk fiber, rose fiber, mint fiber, etc. I know there's banana fiber and other kind of things like that. So what are your thoughts on those, Judith?
Well, some of them are pretty good, like the banana fiber. We've used that one for a long time. I noticed that bamboo wasn't on there. And I think it depends on what your concern is. If your concern is the environment, then you should take a really good look at what it takes to process this. Because for a lot of them, they're processed by a lyocell. So I'll tell you what my experience was with the bamboo. And everything that you listed there would have go through a similar process to become fiber. So one of the things that happens with those, with the fibers like bamboo and the rose and I don't know about the mint one, but I'm sure it's in the same range, is that they're reduced to a slurry and then reduced to a liquid and then sprayed through a nozzle that forms the shape of them and then hardened. And in doing that, we use some pretty wicked chemicals. Now, I was very curious about the bamboo that was being done. And at that time, I had a friend who was a pulp mill expert. He traveled all over the world. He's passed away now, but he was a really, really wonderful guy. And Bob said, I asked him, and he said, let's just call him. We'll just call the Chinese guy who's in head of it. I know him, and we'll just call him. So we called him and had this very interesting interview about how they were doing it. And so I asked him, so he went through it and he explained what they were doing. It is done in a pulp mill. And pulp mills can have many different types of processes. And I asked him what process it was that they were using. And there was a long, long silence. What I'd actually asked him was, what were the environmental issues or permits that were necessary to make this bamboo? And there's this great long pause. And then he said, Madam, you can be sure that the processes that we are making this bamboo fiber from are legal in my country. I thought that was very clever. So then I started looking into lyocell, and lyocell is the one method of processing cellulose fibers into cellulose vegetable matter into a fiber. And so there's many, many, many pulp mill processes. Some of them are better than others, but lyocell can be very organic. It was developed in Germany. It's the main, if you're looking for a good pulp mill process, it's probably one of the better ones. But for instance, there's a product on the market that is bamboo that was made in Europe. And I looked it up, and you can look them up, they can't not tell you. It's a bit of a journey to do it. They can't not tell you how the product's made and still sell it. So I looked it up, and it said, here's the patent that covers this particular type of recycled or reproduced fiber. And it said it used the lyocell process whenever possible. And it used zero emission pulp mills whenever possible. And that's the only thing that makes Tencel different from rayon, is that whenever possible, they will use these good things. And so it's up to us to be careful about what we use and make sure that we know what the process is. And it's, with the internet nowadays, you have everything at your fingertips. You have to be a little careful about what you believe. That's all. But so that's, we talk about Tencel as if it was next to organic, but only when it's possible.
So I'm going to write your answer to that one down as stick to wool. Is that right? Okay.
Wool, cotton, silk. I'm really think that silk is a really good deal. Yeah. Silk.
Okay. There we go. All right.
Yeah.
I like that. Another question on here. if you're writing anything, or do you have any upcoming articles or books or anything like that that you can possibly talk about? Or you can just, if you can't talk about it, you can simply say yes. But
Yes. Yes, I am. Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I'm doing
Right.
some writing for JC for Ply, and I'm really enjoying it. But I can't tell you what it's about. Yeah.
Okay.
We have to sign our little contract that we won't do that. Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
can I ask what type of media it is? Whether it's an article or a book, or no?
Oh, it's an article. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
writing some
Okay.
articles. Yeah.
All right.
Happily.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. All right. Let me keep on digging into here. Somebody wanted to know what your favorite fiber was, and I know, right? That seems.
What I got in my hand at the time
Yeah.
is what it
There
is.
there you go. And then the follow-up question to that was, what's the most unusual or interesting fiber you've spun?
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, so I did spin the because there's a gold thread that turns up in that's talked about in medieval times, and it comes from a mussel. And so I went down and collected the bearded mussels, and I collected some of that, and I did spin that. That was really fun. But there's a lot of interesting things that we used to spin that we don't spin anymore. That we've just weeded out some of them. Yeah, some of them I wish that we hadn't weeded them out. But there we go. Yeah.
So this isn't somebody else's question. This is mine. But why do you love Shetland so much? You and I, we go back and forth on this sometimes, and both my dad.
Right. Yeah, that we do. We've had lots of Shetland.
And that.
Well, I like them because they're first of all, they're interesting animals. For when I lived in Montana, I worked with Kathy Campbell, who had owns Gates of the Mountains, one of the early Shetland flocks, 450 sheep. That makes it probably one of the largest Shetland flocks. And they were really interesting animals. It's a cold weather there. And they were so hardy. And they also liked us. They have the gene for domestication. They could be like puppies. You could have them in the house if you wanted to. But they like us. So most sheep, it's easy to move them. I've moved millions of sheep. And that isn't even an exaggeration. So when you're moving a big flock of sheep, you just get around them and you just move towards them, and their predator's response kicks in and they move forward. If you move towards a Shetland, it's going to run up to you like a puppy. So they're very different. So the animal itself I like, and they're thrifty, and they produce on one fleece enough different kinds of yarn to keep the civilization going. They have a coarse thread that you could make twine out of. You could, in Shetland, you'll often, well, if you see some of the old places, they make a cord that goes through 2 sticks of wood, because metal is really hard to come by. It has to be brought in. So they make a cord that goes through 2 pieces of wood, and they tie a knot on either side of it, and that's a nail. And it lasts a good long time. They make the cloth that goes under the heather. They use a heather and grass roof. They use a cloth that's made also out of that's called the tog, the outer coat. And am I right? Yes, I think so. That they use the tog to weave, again, this little stainless steel wire, and then it prevents the dirt and the bugs and the other little unmentionable things coming down into your porridge in the morning. Yeah. Right. You haven't lived in a sod house.
I have not.
Yes, right.
Although, I will say,
that barrier. Yeah.
Yeah, I will say we're not that far from it. My grandmother was born in a sod house in Nebraska, so it's funny, how quickly we forget these things, right? We
do forget them, and they are interesting, and they're so beautiful when they bloom. They just are. Oh, lovely. But so you've got the really fine stuff up on the neck, around the ears, just under the chin. That is just like cashmere, and it doesn't have the hair follicles in it at all, because it's just next to the skin there, and it's going to shed out when it gets warmer. And so it just comes in when it gets cold. But the rest of the fleece, from the front shoulder to the mid to the back, there's maybe 3 or 4 or 5 different useful breeds of sheep in that one. So you could get everything you ever wanted from a sheep out of a Shetland. So you get the coarse fiber, the very, very, very soft fiber. You can get medium fiber. You can get fiber that has a really high crimp and a medium crimp. It is a disaster when you think about trying to get. What happens is that, of course, nowadays we're going to shear them rather than lay them down and let them shed out in our laps and pull the fiber out so that we can sort it and separate the hair from the down fiber. But gotcha. And I think that has given Shetland a different name. We think of it as a coarser fiber. It isn't. It's multiple fibers in there.
Well, and I
beautiful colors.
I think the dependent upon the producer, the variety that you can get is very different. I mean, you will see.
Oh gosh, yeah.
They will have a multi-coat fleece that does have 3 and 4 and 5 different types of fiber, and then you have some people who are breeding just for the really fines.
Yeah, that's right. You can make a merino out of anything.
Exactly. Just keep selecting and eating.
Well, it is. And we don't have a very big gene pool for Shetlands here. So I wasn't living in America at the time, but I was working a lot out here on the islands and around about. And I was here when the first Shetlands came into, not North America, because we had Shetlands in Canada, but came in. So the genes for those animals are few and far between. And so sooner or later, that's going to cause, a little bit of a problem. But what happened is that we had closed, so we had this importation. That's not cheap to bring sheep from Britain and have them go into quarantine and then bring them to a new country and naturalize them so that their stomach contents can digest what we have here. And then we had to close the border to bringing in sheep, period, which is what we have done now. So what we have is on the rare breeds is we have a treasure hole, it's just a huge treasure box of genetic material, but we can't renew it very easily. And so crossing out is probably not as bad as it normally would be in losing characteristics, but we will. So what we're doing now is we're breeding a sheep that will fit our landscape. And that's the way it should be. It won't be a traditional Shetland. I see modern Shetlands. Remember that when you take the guard hairs out, when you actually are breeding, we think you're breeding that undercoat out, the shed coat out, you are. And so what you're actually doing is putting more hair coat in the sheep, but it's just finer and finer and finer and finer and finer. And so eventually, like a merino doesn't have a down coat. It doesn't root, it doesn't shed. A merino, it used to be, if you looked at it, at the cellular structure of it, it is only hair coats. But they're so fine that now they're crimped, and now they're long, and now they're dense, as if they were an undercoat. And I didn't know that until I started studying about fleece structure. But when we breed to improve a sheep, we're breeding the hair fiber, not the down coat, because the down coat will, with an interaction of light on the eyeball of the sheep, stop growing, and then it'll have a break in it and it'll shed it out, because sheep are clever, just like us. They put a sweater on in the wintertime and they take it off in the summertime. And we can't stop that except by breeding out the fine fiber. So it's actually, when you look at some of those merinos, they are masterpieces of genetic modification, and we're lucky to have them.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. We bend them to our will.
That's
Like
it.
we do everything else. Yeah. Yeah.
I was just going to say, this being America, are we going to grow those Shetland to be bigger and better than everybody else's
Oh
Shetland?
my goodness, we already have. We
Yeah.
already have. Yeah. Yeah, we have. And we've bred them to have a different type of fleece. There are 2 Shetland registries now for different qualities.
Yeah.
And it bothered me at first because, of course, I want what I really want is the arc, where you keep a gene pool separate for time of need, so that when you have a pandemic amongst the animal kingdom, and we will, we always do, that happens, on a rotating basis, we're going to have some extinction between different types of mammals. And what we should do is have a certified group that is only got the genetics, it's too late now, but has only got the genetics for the sheep that are in Scotland. And even the ones in Scotland are crossed out now and then. So if we kept those as a trust, as a kind of a sheep trust, a genetic trust, on the hoof trust, then I would say go for it, crossbreed them, pay attention, make sure that you remember that if you're going to crossbreed, you're going to get some serious genetic flaws, and be willing to take care of it. If you can't do that, do not crossbreed. Just don't do it, because you're going to get things that you don't want. You're going to get things that are unsuccessful and painful. And that's something you have to take on. And I think quite often people don't know enough about crossbreeding to realize that there can be problems that they will have to deal with. Heart murmurs, holes in hearts, crippled jaws, bad shaped legs, on and on and on and on and on. Yeah. So
we need a seed stock, a reservation of seed stock, just like they have for all agriculture, basically, right? All of our plants.
Yeah.
And need one of those.
That's what we need. We need a heritage trust for sheep. Yeah. Sheep.
I think the Shave 'em to Save 'em initiative has done a good start with that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think we're quite where that needs to be. So we'll put that, let's say, maybe just above the multi-warp loom, and then below maybe some of the other things that you mentioned earlier today, right?
That's right. Yeah. We'll shape the world to our taste. Yeah, that'd be good.
Well, we've got just a few minutes left, so I think I'll wrap together a couple of the questions that I've seen through the comments here. The first one, I don't have time to read them all, but just about everybody here has said thank you. How much they appreciate your teaching and everything that you've taught them throughout the years. So I'll give you a group thank you there from everybody who's on, both here on Zoom and on Facebook with us. But the one kind of general question that's coming together here is sort of how can people support you, especially through COVID? Now that you're not home, how are you keeping yourself busy? And I will preempt. I'll say the one thing there is now that we're carrying your dyes. I mean, we're happy to help people out that way until there's some better and more direct way, I guess, for them to get them from you. So that was one of the questions was, if you were at some point going to have an online marketplace or anything like that where people could purchase direct from you. So I guess the question is, what are you doing to keep yourself busy? Not that you should have a problem with that, but what are you doing now that you're not on the road and out there and seeing everybody? And then how can people support you?
Well, that I think, yes, I am keeping busy. I did find that I was a bit of a slug for the first month. Just sort of wandered around and picked things up and put them down. But yeah, I've got a lot of fleece at the moment that I am looking at and sorting, quite a lot. It's one of those things where if somebody asked me how much fleece I'd have to say, who wants to know, quite a lot. And I love fleece. I am completely over the top, irresponsible fleece buyer. And so I'm sorting that out and seeing what I can do. I'll make some yarn this year. That's what I'll do. And I'm going to make fabric. That's what I want to do. So
Are you to spin that and weave that? Spin
I
it,
am.
spin it.
I'm going to make a combination of hand spun and small lot independent mill spun, so that I determine what the mill can do, because I can certainly spin enough to weave, but I want to keep it within a reasonable price range for people.
Yeah,
that's what I want. And I think people are going back to sewing a lot, so that's kind of what I want to do.
Okay.
But yeah, and I will, once I get my technological skills honed up a little better. As you know, they are a little bit weak. That I will start with a website that we can have stuff on. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So
I'll have my bats, my peonies, and those kind of things on there.
Okay. Is there any way for people to find out about that, or should I? Maybe let's set this up. Why don't you let me know when that's up and running, and we can help promote that via our newsletter and through our website, because I know just about everybody. Yeah, about everybody who's on the call here today is going to be somebody who subscribes to our newsletter or our social media. So if you let us know when that goes live, we'll make sure that we let everybody know.
Oh, that'd be wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I just want to tell everybody how much we all miss them. We miss them. Every teacher misses you, and I especially miss you. And I'm really looking forward when we can be together again in whatever way we can. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much for these years. They've been wonderful. Yeah.
I second that emotion. It is tough being home and not being able to see our friends, and not being able to share our our knowledge. And as a teacher, I know you feel the same way. Sometimes we learn just as much from our students as we can teach them sometimes. And so, being out there is as much a growth experience for us as it is for a lot of our students. And it's tough.
For sure. Yeah, no, that's a very mutual thing. I can tell you that it's an enriching situation to teach. If you haven't ever done it, do try, because I get so much back from it. It's very valuable for me. Yeah.
All right. Is there any one last thing? I think that was a great spot to leave off in. Is there any one last piece of advice, whether it's about spinning or dyeing or the world in general, or
Sure. Okay. Here's my quick piece of advice. So
here we go.
I'm in North Carolina. I fly home. Seattle has disappeared. There's nobody anywhere. And I come out to my house, and I live in the middle on the last rock, in the west, and all by myself alone. And I wandered around dismally for about 6 weeks, just dismally. Do you know what put my head back together? Was sitting down and spinning and doing my work. It was wonderful. It was like, oh, right, there's the missing part. Yeah. So even if you are stressed right now, take that 20-minute break at least once a day where you sit down. Don't put your work away. Sit down. Give yourself that time, no matter what responsibilities you have. The first one you have is to make sure that you are fully functioning and rested and secure. And I found that my work gave me that. It was great. Too bad it took so long.
Yeah. And you would think, of all people, you would think that you would know that, right?
No, I know. How embarrassingly true. Yeah, but it was startling how well it worked. It was like, oh, right, here I am. Yeah.
Well, that is excellent advice. Something we can, I think, all take. Everybody here is either a fiber artist or a spinner or something along those lines, and we can absolutely, like you said, do the work. It's meditative, it's cathartic, and kind of find your center doing that. So I think that's a great spot to leave off. So Judith, thank you very, very much. I do appreciate it. Everybody, this recording will be available at clemes.com/summercamp. That's also where you can find Judith's dyes. And the code word for today, once again, is sheep. And we're giving away 4 ounces of Judith's, let's see, maybe one of her top 5 breeds with Shetland, I think, in there. I think it makes the top slide. All right.
Yeah, love Shetland. Yeah.
And with that, we will sign off. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. 1 day left of summer camp. That's tomorrow at 1 p.m. Pacific. We're going to talk about how to deal with dirty and tender and broken fleece. We'll be using our lock pop to talk about that. And we hope to see you then. Thanks, everybody.